Hi everyone, my name is Carlos de Souza. I'm a solution architect on the Fast Track team at Microsoft. And today I have with me Dan El Halawani. Dan, you want to say hi?
Hi, folks. I'm Dan. I'm a solution architect on the Fast Track team with Carl.
So Dan, I'm super excited to have you back on the show again. Today we're going to see something that is actually, I think, your baby on the Fast Track team that we built, one of these implementation assets, and it is the solution. It is the vendor self-service management portal. It's like a mouthful, but it sounds very impressive. What is it, Dan?
Yeah, so we built a vendor self-service solution to essentially allow for vendors to manage and self-serve the provisioning, deprovisioning, and management of their third-party resources or their resources, right? So as a customer, I might contract vendors to have resources go do work for me, and I might use field service to do that. That can get really intense to manage as a customer because you're having to manage bookable resources, provisioning, license assignment, security group assignment for all of these third-party resources. Well, we wanted to put together a solution with a number of automations to allow for these vendors to self-serve their own resource provisioning, management, deprovisioning for your tenant. So that as a customer admin, you don't have to spend so much manual time doing these things, and you can offload that onto the vendor admin, and then they can do it as they need to.
Yeah, this sounds like a huge time saver. I think you're making people's lives a lot easier, it sounds like.
Hopefully, yeah.
Um, yeah, do you want to show us, Dan, how this thing works?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. All right, so let's check out what's going on here. So we have a vendor self-service solution, as we've been calling it, and it has a number of components in it. Some of those are Azure Functions, some of those are flows, and a bunch are out-of-the-box Dynamics 365 components. Okay.
And this is
Uh,
our Fast Track GitHub, right? Our
yes, this
which has
is.
a ton of resources, by the way, not just on this, but tons of really good stuff. But yeah, tell us more
Yes.
about this one, please.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'm going to hop into kind of a full-on demo here of the solution to show you the ins and outs. But these are all the components involved, and we host it out here, like Carl was saying, on our GitHub site. We provide all of the source code for this, and we provide unmanaged solutions because we want you as a customer or partner or user to be able to extend it to your heart's content. But what are we actually doing here? Let's take a look. Okay, so I'm going to pop over to Dynamics 365 here, and you can see that I just have a very simple model-driven app here. Okay, a very simple model-driven app. And this model-driven app is called Vendor Administration. It's a custom model-driven app, but it basically surfaces one table. And we call them technicians out here, but really they're just contact records. They're just contact records. So that's the only thing that a vendor admin on their end really needs to be concerned about or see in the system. So the way we do this is we have a number of automations behind the scenes that kind of make the contact record here a sort of portal for the vendor admin to do their setup, their provisioning, their management configuration of their resources, and have that implicitly, automatically, and real time apply to the bookable resource behind the scenes. Okay. So let's say, for example, I'm a vendor admin and I want to create a new resource. I want to provision a new resource. We've got somebody new coming onto the team. We want to get them all set up and ready to go. Okay, that's fine. I'll click new here and you can see it says new contact. We have a whole bunch of specific fields here that we have set up for this process. Okay, and this is a bespoke form for this process. All right, we've got the usual things like name and email. Now, email is important, by the way, because when we're setting this resource up, we're actually doing an Azure B2B invite behind the scenes. Because remember, the use case here is that as a customer who uses vendors who have contractor resources, we want to make sure that they can log in to our tenant via the field service mobile app and do their work, right? So this email
Mhm.
field is obviously very important because that's where the invite will get sent to, right? Now, We have a whole bunch of other fields on here too. We've got the technician address because that can be very important depending on your field service use case scenario, knowing where your resource address is, right? And we've got the appropriate geocoding here for that as well. Now, you'll see something else here. On this field service tab, we have a whole number of fields that, if you're familiar with the bookable resource record, these should look pretty familiar to you as well, right? And these fields out here are provided so that the vendor admin has a level of control over their bookable resource behind the scenes, right? So I can change and set various things on here. And then finally, we do also surface the work hours component. Now, we do a little bit of trickery here because we can't actually put the work hours PCF control on the contact form, but we can do a little bit of magic with out-of-the-box Dynamics 365 using the out-of-the-box form within a form component to surface this PCF control. I'll show more about that later. But let's go through it. Let's say I want to create a new resource. So I'm going to call this guy, let's say D365 Cafe Tech. This guy is our tech for our show here. And we're going to say D365 Cafe Tech at gmail.com. One thing to note, by the way, while we're here at the gmail.com. So if you are, you can log into the field service mobile app, whether or not you have a work or school account or not a work or school account. Obviously, at gmail.com is a non-work or school account. The only thing is when you log in with this non-work or school account, you'll need to use that fully qualified username where it does the hashtag EXC hashtag, and we can show that a little bit later. If you have a work or school account, though, easy peasy. You just use the email here to log in. Okay. But back to the user setup. Okay. So let's put in a technician address. Let's say 1234. Let's do a fake one right out here. And then we can do some other things, by the way. I still haven't saved this guy yet, but we can preset a number of things here. So I can go to my field service tab and I can say, okay, no. I want my start and end location to be resource address. I want their hourly rate to be 150. Let's set their warehouse up. Let's set their org unit up, right? We can preset all of these things. Now, when I go over here and save it, of course, it's going to create that contact. It's going to geocode that contact importantly as well. But you'll see something that appeared here called technician characteristics. Technician characteristics are what you might expect. They're bookable resource characteristics. Now, this table itself is a custom table, but we have a synchronization behind the scenes with the actual bookable resource characteristics for this resource when they're created. And I can preset this stuff up too. I can do that right here. Let's say that this guy is really good at computer setup. We can save and close that. Okay, cool. So now my resource is ready to be provisioned, but they've not been provisioned yet. And that's where this little setup technician button comes into play. This little setup technician button.
That looks like a very powerful button, by the way.
It is the button that triggers all the magic. So it kind of is, yes, for this solution. So don't click it lightly. But when we do click it, and then we save our record, there's a number of things that are going to start to happen behind the scenes here. So first off, we have a Power Automate flow that's going to do a whole bunch of work for us. Let's actually take a look at that Power Automate flow while we're at it. So this flow, and you can see it's running already here. That's great. It's going to do a number of heavy lifting things for us. It's going to call an Azure function to Azure B2B invite this person via that email that we put in the email field. It's going to send an invite out to them. Now, because the user creation process in Entra ID, when you do an invite like this, it's asynchronous, but it's still fairly quick. We just make sure we wait a minute because we want to make sure the user is there when we go to the next steps here, which are going to be calling an Azure function to assign a license to a user and calling another Azure function to add the user to a Dataverse security group so they can log in, right? So they have the right permissions to actually get in the system. And behind the scenes, we have a few different environment variables in our solution here that allow for this to happen. So you can specify your own license. You can specify your own group, right? So if we go back here, it should be about complete and there we go, okay? It's assigned a license to the user and it's added them to a security group. And I bet if we go out to our Microsoft 365 admin portal here, we can probably see that guy out here. And yes, we can. D365 Cafe Tech. And you can see the license they have is the field service contractor license, which we've specified in our environment variables. That's how that system knows what license to give this person. And furthermore, if we check our security group, we should see them out here too, and we do. D365 Cafe Tech. So that's great. Now the user is all set up. And back to a point I was making earlier, this username is the kind of username I was talking about. If you have a non-worker school account, you're going to need to use this longer kind of string to log into the field service mobile app. That's okay though. You can still get in and use it just fine. If you have a worker school account, it'll just be your normal email with no other appending needed there, as it were. Okay, so now we have this user created. And by the way, with Azure B2B, we can do all these things without the person having accepted the invite yet. We can preset them up all the way. They don't have to go and accept the invite before we do any of these things. Okay. Now, the next part here is where we're going to switch over a little bit because, of course, it takes some time to provision new users in Dynamics, right? After you've given them a license, it can be a few minutes. Right, so we're not going to wait for that to happen. We're just going to go to a resource that I've set up beforehand, that I baked beforehand here. So I'm going to open this guy up. And one thing that's important here that I want to highlight is the synchronization that happens between these two things. So let's take a step back. When the user is actually created, this new resource that we've provisioned and licensed, when they're actually created in Dataverse, we have a plugin that runs on create of that user to create their bookable resource. And we create their bookable resource with all the settings that were pre-set up on here, right? So they're ready to go. When they're provisioned, they're basically good to go to log in and do their work if you've set them up the way that you wanted them to be set up in the first place, right? But let's say that you had some changes you wanted to make, right? Now, as a vendor admin in this scenario, I'll never see this page. I'll never see this bookable resource or anything of the sort. All I get to see is this contact, right? It's kind of the portal in this solution, right? So let's say that I wanted to give this guy another characteristic. Let's say he added a new skill for himself. Let's say that he's really good now at surround sound setup. Okay, cool. So we can set that here. And we see that reflected here. But if I go to this page here and refresh, we can see that the bookable resource got that characteristic applied immediately as well. And so too with other settings that we have on here, right? If I say maybe this guy is making 250 now, okay, got a bit of a bump there. Okay, we save it, and then we can check over here, and implicitly and automatically you will see that it reflects 250. Okay, now
cool.
The way we're doing all of this is it's actually a synchronous plugin. And if you're well versed with Dynamics, you might be like, wait, why synchronous plugin though? And there's a very good specific reason for that. And that is because when there are certain fields and certain settings on a bookable resource that you're not supposed to do, right? And so we block folks from making bad decisions like that by actually blocking them from doing that. So for example, if I wanted to change my start location to be location agnostic, and my end location is still resource address, well, that doesn't make sense, right? We can't do that. If I save that on our normal bookable resource form, you can see it tells the user that, so they know that, oops, they did something wrong. Well, here's the thing. We're trying to make the customer admin's life easier by offloading work onto the vendor admin, but that doesn't work very well if they're allowed to make mistakes like that. That might break things, right? So what do? We use a synchronous plugin to pipe those error messages right back up through the pipeline to the vendor admin here. You can see it shows a very similar message here, right? So that they can't, kind of do bad things that might disable the usage of their resource, right? And that's pretty important, because if we add further logic out here, we being Microsoft, so that you can't do certain other things, for example, that'll implicitly and automatically reflect here, because again, we're just piping through the out-of-box plugin error that showed up. Okay. So that's kind of the real-time synchronization that's happening here. Okay. And from a work hours perspective, like I was saying, we do a little bit of trickery to show this on here because we can't surface the work hours PCF control on another form for various technical limitations. Okay. But we can do a form within a form, which is an out-of-box dynamics component. If you guys haven't worked with it, it's like a lifesaver all the time for me. We use that component here because behind the scenes on the contact, actually, we'll do our fun God mode. We can see that there's a bookable resource lookup field here that's populated by our plugin when that user was created. And so we can leverage that to show the work hours on this contact for that bookable resource. And it looks and acts and behaves all the same as the one on the bookable resource itself, because technically it is kind of on the bookable resource, right? And so we can do all the same sort of things that we could do out there for these work hours, right? So that's the really the synchronization heart of this solution, where we're basically showing that contact record as a portal of sorts for a vendor admin to do their maintenance. And now this guy, DanCat Contractor 16, he's all ready to go. He can log into the field service mobile app, do his work, and be done. And the customer admin really had very little to play in the process of that. There is also one more feature that we kind of implement behind the scenes that I want to make sure I cover, just because it's often a question with a solution like this. As you can see, we have a technician address here, and behind the scenes, that means that on our bookable resource, which is connected to a user, right, we're going to have that address be set for that user as well. And really, that geocode, right, that's really important for location-aware scheduling, for resource address-based scheduling. Now, the thing with Entra is that if somebody out here is setting an address on this guy, or some process is setting an address on them, that runs a risk of overwriting what we have here. But we don't want that to happen, right? We always want to trust the vendor technician address that the vendor admin put in here themselves the most, right? Because we're trying to offload things onto them. So if anything comes in to try to change this geocoding on this user, right, that's not the vendor admin themselves doing it on this form, we silently revert it. We don't even block it. We just quietly revert it. So if this were to be changed to 0, it's going to quietly revert to 44.9, right? Just to make sure that we're always empowering and trusting the vendor admin to do their setup on this form, including the address and the geocoding, which can be very important. But that's essentially the solution. There's a lot of moving parts to it, but it all comes together to really make customer admin's life easier. And as a vendor admin, you don't have to wait on the customer admin to do things for you, right? You can just go in and do the things you need to do.
Right, right. You know, like as you're going through this, I'm thinking, wow, you've thought of so many things here. So many different little situations that could come up, and we don't want to break the business logic of the base application. We want to take advantage of things that are already there, make it as simple as
Right,
possible, right?
right.
This is a very well thought out app, I guess. Very nice. Now, let me
Thank
ask
you.
you a question here, right? So let's say I had a bunch of users that are already set up as users in the system, but they're not set up as in everything that you showed me. Is there a way that I could do like a bulk, uh, you know, uh, set this up in bulk, I guess, select some users and just
Yeah.
like, yeah, how would I do that?
For sure, for sure. Well, so there's two aspects to that, right? Anything you have automation-wise, whether it be, out-of-box import or what have you, we can you can create these contact records, right? Just in the same normal way you'd do that for any other contact record, setting the appropriate fields as you need to. And then when you have all of those things set up, to your point, let's say, okay, we're ready to go. We want to activate our 100 new, resources, our new techs. Right? That's just
Hmm.
fine. you can just select them all in the appropriate view or query, and then you can just use our handy bulk edit and tick the setup technician flag to yes. And if I click save, I won't click save on these since they're already set up. But if you click
Uh,
save on this, behind the scenes,
uh,
it's just going to invoke the setup process for all of these users. Our flow is
right.
going to go through, invite them, license them, add them to the
Yep.
right security groups, and all the rest, and kind of get that all done for you. So, a couple clicks, and bam, you're up and running.
That's incredible. That's incredible. And I really want to stress here, like the time saving, you've taken us through this, like the process, but if we think about it, right, the manual invite you don't have to do, right? The manual license assignment, the manual security group, the manual bookable resource, right? What am I missing? I'm missing some other manual steps, right?
Absolutely,
Um,
getting all of these characteristics set up, getting all
yep.
of these the kind of fields set up the way the vendor needs or wants them to be, but then not even
Yep.
just initial setup, the maintenance of that. Let's say that vendor resource needed to add a new characteristic, a new skill here. Well, now you're doing that for them. That's another manual step, and then
Sure.
scale that out to hundreds or thousands of contractor users. That's
Wow. Yeah.
that's very that's a lot of work, right? It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And then even too, deprovisioning of these resources, right? We automate that too. So it really the amount of manual steps can really stack up fast. And I think that's why this solution really can provide a lot of benefit and help to both customers and vendors, right?
Yeah. Very nice. Very nice. And when we started, you showed us the GitHub page.
Yeah.
So if you're what would it take now for an org to implement this?
Yeah, great question. So this is our fast track GitHub, and we have an unmanaged solution out here, right? You
Okay.
can just download and import into your environment. But then there's another critical component, like I was talking about before. We've got some Azure functions in play here too. So there's really a couple different things you have to do. You have to import the unmanaged solution. We have it unmanaged, by the way, because we want you to be able to extend this, right? We want you to be able to feel free to customize this to your heart's content. Okay, this isn't Microsoft product or first party code. We want you to take it and run with it as much as you'd like. But all you have to do is install the Dynamics 365 solution, ideally in a lower org first, right? And then set up these Azure functions. And we have some good documentation out here as to how to set up the Azure functions if you've never done that before. It's not too bad of a process. And these Azure functions run on basically the cheapest consumption plan. So they're very lightweight and very inexpensive. So you'd set up these Azure functions, install the solution, and then there are some environment variables that I was talking about earlier. There's 6 of them, right? There's 4 for the Azure functions, 1 for each function URI, because each Azure function is an HTTP function that Power Automate calls, right? So there's 4 environment variables for the Azure functions that you just copy paste in. And there's 2 environment variables with GUIDs in them. One is a GUID of the license you want this solution to apply to the given contractor, right? And we talk about how to get that license GUID down here. It's very, very simple. And then the other is the Entra group ID of the security group you want this resource to be added to. Again, very easy GUID to get. We talk about how to get that down here. And then you just paste that in. So once you have all of that set up, you've got the solution installed, the Azure functions installed, and the environment variable set, you're basically ready to go at that point. And then you can go on and start using it, start customizing it, and doing the things you need to do with it. Now, there is a thing I want to mention about the Azure functions. We wanted Azure functions for this kind of solution because ultimately the code for all 4 functions together is something like 200 lines. It's really quick, efficient, and simple, which is very nice. But it is code. There are connectors in Power Automate that can do similar things or the same things that the Azure functions are doing from an Entra ID perspective. Those connectors are just in preview, so we wanted to make sure we released something that was not using anything in preview. But if you're feeling more low code, more power to you. Love that here. You can always feel free to extend this solution to use those preview connectors in the Power Automate flow instead of Azure functions, and you're good to go.
So Dan, this has been amazing. So tell us in 1 or 2 sentences, what did we see today?
Sure. So essentially what we have here is a set of automations to allow for automatic provisioning, deprovisioning, and management of third-party vendor resources, basically offloading that manual burden onto the vendor admins themselves so that customer admins don't have to deal with managing hundreds or thousands of third-party vendor resources in field service.
Dan, this is huge. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carl. Been a pleasure.